Thank you, panelists, and Anand, thank you very much for great moderation. So we'll let them exit the stage here and get our other panelists up in just a moment. Reminder that there are beverages in the corner here, and so now I'd like to, for our next panel, which is focused on the compliance question, going to invite Alan Friedman up to moderate the session. Alan is a principal at Open Codex. Tech and an adjunct professor at Indiana University. As an IU alum, I'm happy to say go Hoosiers on that. And then if we can invite our other panelists up, Justin, Sherry, and John Paul. We'll get started here in just a moment. So,
thank you, appreciate that. Reach the magic bag of supplies.
Patient Paul, thank you, sir. Good to see you, sir. Allow for the required shuffle. And I know we're sort of doing a forced march here where we have back-to-back panels, but we want to make sure we cram in as much content as possible. So. Excellent. So.
Remember, first person is investors. Absolutely.
That's right. So we are going to go ahead and get started, and Alan, the stage is yours. And I would ask, I know some people need to continue the conversations, but if you can take them out in the hallway, we'd appreciate that.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Earlier today, we heard David McCuan describe supply chain risk management as the wild, wild west. But the problem is we still have to actually do it. And so on this panel, we have some excellent perspectives on what actually implementing software assurance and supply chain risk management looks like. So you've got a great panel. You've got Sherry Benedict, supply chain advisor at OMB, Dr. Justin Ubers, who is the CISO at the Department of Transportation. Excuse me.
Chief Cybersecurity.
Excuse me, Chief Cybersecurity Officer.
At Federal Transit Administration. Sorry.
Thank you. And Jean-Paul Bergot, who's the Federal CTO for GuidePoint Security. So, hey, you got some fans?
I do.
All right. Let's dive in. We'll start at the top. We'll go to the White House. And Sherry, there was a recent EO that put the FASC from sort of a small thing that was very insider to front and center on leading on SCRM. Can you tell us a bit about what has changed and what to expect?
Sure. So first, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. I, in addition to being a cyber and supply chain advisor, am also the director for the Federal Acquisition Security Council operations in the Program Management Office. And I see many familiar faces here, so thanks for those of you who are already working with us to come out here today. And so really, by talking about what's changing with the EO, I'll also talk about what's changed with the FASC. And so just by show of hands, how many are familiar with the FASC? Okay. So good number, but so we have been around for some time, since 2018, so 7 years or so, but really are still growing in awareness. And so one of the things that we are more known for is that we do have the lead in the process to identify companies that are potentially considered too risky to do business with the United States government, federal government agencies, and so we do have a process for recommendations to pursue that. However, we are also very much focused on identifying supply chain standards that we should promulgate throughout the federal government. And so to do that, we've partnered with NIST from our original remit, and a couple years ago came out with the NIST 800-161-R1, which is the special publication on cyber and supply chain risk management. And within that, there is a focus, especially on FASCs and FASA and Appendix E. And so, again, it's still kind of growing in awareness, so I wanted to share that with you. And if you look at that, what we were realizing after the FASC stood up and there was a GAO study, GAO report, was that one of the key limitations identified in that regarding maturity of supply chain risk management was really that the agencies were saying they didn't have a common framework to share. And so now within that NIST 800-161R1, if you look at the Appendix E, you will see there is a common risk schema that is identified for organizations. And really what that is doing is pointing to all the agencies who already had the requirements to have supply chain risk management programs from the same statute that stood up FASC, but also now really saying, not do you have a requirement to share, but we especially want you to share on these things, and this is the prioritization. And particularly the prioritization is on those things that are adversarial in nature, that are considered significant or substantial, and could have an impact across multiple agencies. And so I just ask if you get a chance to go back and look at that and think about those things in your organization. And if you have knowledge of those things, please promulgate that towards the FASC.
All right, that's fantastic. And I know we'll dive more into the operational side of that in just a little bit. But now let's shift to the agency perspective. All right, Justin, you've got a lot on your plate. You've got to get software to actually do your mission. How do you find time to think about the SCRM side of things for the software and the contract you're using? And maybe quickly, what are the real risks that you're prioritizing?
So right now it's difficult, right? It's extremely fragmented in how we can approach SCRM. And if we look at it from a top-down perspective, from the agency level down, we have to use 161 to inform our ERM, our enterprise-wide risk management, as well as how we're implementing the RMF, right, risk management framework. So we got to pull that together, inform the risk posture and controls for the agency, and then trickle down to where we're actually implementing and looking at this from a system perspective, right? So that right there, and then we add in the layer of 853 controls in Rev 5 that have come out and that we have to do, right, the SR controls, as the granular controls for the systems. And it becomes very difficult to pull all this together, right? So right now, well, not too long ago, way we were handling this was manual, and I would love to see it automated. I had to teach my teams how to go and review software from the ground up, including like point of origin, the dependencies and packages that are within the software, holding companies. That's a pretty big task for a security team to take on when most of them are just like, I want to patch my vulnerabilities and get these things that I understand right here done. And then the other part of the challenge that I see with SCRM is our acquisition professionals. I mean, they are woefully unprepared, underprepared to do this, and that's not digging on them. Full transparency, my wife's a contracting officer, so I'm really not digging on the contracting officers. They're awesome. But seriously, I mean, there's some DAU modules for IT acquisitions, and there's some requirements to go out and learn some of this. But these folks are busy, the security teams are busy, and we've got to find a way to do cross collaboration to get this down, so we can speak the same language, have a common lexicon about approach, and then actually put some effort towards this from a supply chain security perspective in acquisitions. That's difficult, especially with the now we've got changes to the FAR coming out and other things. So there's some other ripple impacts that are happening. So right now, the risks to close the loop on your question is a lot of the process is still manual. Even when we have an inventory of software, it's just literally an inventory like I've got X software, but we don't have the enriched data to tell us what's going on with it, why we should care, where the risks are. And then from an acquisitions perspective, which I think is the linchpin, is we don't have enough cross collaboration and knowledge to do this adequately and make sure we have good contracts and good follow through.
All right, and I think you touched on a core piece there, which is automation, right? In 2025, I don't care what your security role is, if automation is not part of your plan moving forward, you're doing it wrong. Jean-Paul, you spent a lot of time thinking about what are the tools that can actually automate things. What do we have today, and what should we be looking for moving forward?
Yeah, I think today we're just getting to the point, especially in this field, where companies and organizations are finding ways to use technology and automation to solve that data problem. Justin mentioned we have to have a common framework. He and I talked quite a bit about many different areas of cybersecurity where we have to have the same lexicon. We have to have normalization of how we communicate. That's key and critical, and that's going to be part of the technology conversation, because if you have automation and contextualization, but it's not normalized and you don't have a common framework to communicate, it really doesn't matter. We're getting there on that part of this part of our world, and I see lots of technology out there that both automates what the processes are and contextualizes for you. We've seen a big problem, especially he mentioned the contracting organizations. How do you take all this data and do something with it that matters to your organization? It doesn't matter if you provide me all the threats, all the risks, all the company's issues, if you don't make it important for what I needed to know. And that's where we're seeing that happening now. The other part, and I would say there's two big buckets. It's the data that we're taking in from outside, and we're now processing and automating, but also internally, everything that is the supply chain of what we're doing internally needs to be automated, and we need to bring all that together. And I do see quite a bit of that. I mean, I'll even throw a shout out to our sponsor, Lineage. They do a lot of what we're talking about, and automating and contextualizing that information and making it usable and less labor to do that.
Well, so, and I wanted to pull a thread without picking any one of the wonderful companies that are participating in this particular event. Can you give an example of, hey, we had a bunch of data, we had put it in context, and that drove a particular type of action?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that to me is jumping out is there's a lot of conversation around containers and how we source containers and what supply chain issues that provides. If I have a container and we're not sure what's in there, there may be a supply chain issue inside of that container, and how do we know what that's going to cause down the line? And we see two things happening in that. One is more information about what's in the containers, what should we be worried about, and two, sourcing more pure and vulnerability resolved and supply chain risk resolved containers that you can actually say, I want to have a constant feed of an updated container no matter what happens. Yeah. I don't have that issue anymore. So both of those jump out to me as one of the areas that's really, we see some movement.
Fantastic. Maybe it's just me, but I happen to think we sort of need S-bombs for that sort of thing. But,
No surprise.
I was just gonna go S-bomb, so I get the prize. But, I had a great conversation with somebody yesterday. And it was a vendor demo, but it hit on a lot of these themes that we are talking about. And one of the biggest ones is like, when you guys hear software, what do you think? You think a discrete thing that you're using, but you got dependencies, libraries. The software is composed of software and modules and other things. And so, that S-bomb that, I do get the prize, I think, that S-bomb that we're talking about, it needs to be granular enough that we can dig down and look at these things, because when we're using these, everything's in our organization, everything's connected, right? And whatever I bring in is actually a risk now that I've introduced to the network or the organizational footprint, and that affects everybody. So all the way down to this level needs to be seen so we understand where something happens. So if another Log4j incident happens, we can get down to that, say exactly here, this is the path, I'm tracing it, I'm remediating, or I'm requiring my vendor to remediate. We need that type of function.
Excellent. Sure. And I did promise a prize to the first panelist to mention S-bomb. So there are a couple of CISA S-bomb stickers. If you need to know more about S-bomb, go to cisa.gov/S-bomb. Still your number one resource for all the information.
I appreciate you.
And love to my friends from CISA sitting here in the front row. So let's take a step back here and start saying, all right, we're all accountable to those above us. We're all accountable to the organizations, and at the end of the day, we need some way of saying, are we doing the job right? So let's talk metrics. Are there today convenient metrics that you think we should be thinking about for acquisition officers or program managers to measure the effectiveness of their SCRM process or their assurance process? So let's start with Sherry.
Thanks. Yeah. So, yes, I do. And to answer that, I'll give you what's happening at EOP through FASC, but also just a personal perspective. So I'll start with the latter. So first, I do come from the intelligence community background as a cyber leader and IT manager, but then also have DoD background. And so I bring those both together to the perspective of cyber supply chain risk management, to the extent that when I think of the term left of boom we've heard so much about this week, I think of cyber supply chain risk management as having really two booms, right? And the most important boom for us is really right of contract award, right? And so for us, we need to look even further out in advance in that defensive depth perspective. So now I'll pivot to what I see is happening through FASC and how we're supporting the administration. And as we mentioned earlier, we are now leading and helping the compliance activity for the EO 14306 about strengthening the supply chain through cybersecurity. And so to that end, we are looking to really change the metrics, to really value what we talked about earlier, that information sharing, that supply chain risk management sharing. And so as we think about doing that, right now, again, we're going to just recognize, we're going to start by asking, are you sharing, and making sure that we all understand how to do that. But in the future, I would say, again, my own personal perspective, I think it would be great to see us go left of that first boom. And really to that point, are we able to measure how far in advance of contract award we are getting that information to that actual contract officer that needs to make that decision?
All right, get it early and often, right? Make sure that, to John Paul's point, something that can be continuously updated as well. Yeah. Other thoughts on what metrics you're going to see?
Are you going to jump in on that one? I saw you.
No, you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it goes back to all this is a stream of consciousness, because metrics also depends on, do we have that common framework of what the metrics are? How are they consumed? What does it mean? I can give you a ton of metrics, but if I don't know how to consume that, how to apply that, and if I'm going to use automation, I have to have that common framework, because what are you automating if you don't know what to do with it? Now you need a person to figure that out. Now we're back to it all runs together. When you start talking about these topics, all of it has to move together. We have to have that common framework. We have to have the standards for what we expect the organizations to do. Then we have to have the technology that uses those and automates those. So I think it all works together in one parallel movement forward.
Yeah, we
We
chatted
just-
about
yeah.
that before.
That's the problem of having.
That's why I gave it to you, Justin. I was
Y'all
like,
should
he's
have
gonna say
been
the same
in the
thing I'm gonna
green
say.
room where we had an amazing conversation. You
Yeah.
would have learned so much. No, Steve.
We were going to record it and just play it up there. But the common lexicon and being able to speak a common language to standardize things helps, right? Because now we all understand what we're talking about. But to tug on that a little further, we can then use it to do like risk triage, right? And in that left of procurement, and that should be. So that brings up the question about, like you were saying, well, we're sharing data. Make sure it's not one way, right? We're not sharing up and it's not coming back down. We have to have that means of communication, and what we're sharing matters. Like, what are the important things? There are going to be important things at different levels, right? My agency's, risk posture and way that we're looking at risk itself is going to inform some of the things that are important locally. And then you're going to want to see certain things shared, by definition from 161 and the data sharing that comes in. So we got to get those things pulled together and share in the various contexts, and they've got to be interoperable. We got to be able to figure out how to speak to it. And then that can tie in to the automation, and we can use that for, just-in-time risk scoring and that type of thing, right? So,
And I think the other part of, and I'm gonna jump on something you and I talked about, is it has to be continuous, has to be just it's not even a left of boom, it's constant.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's got to be constant.
Yeah.
And the only way that's effective is if we only assess the supply chain risk at the time of purchase. What's the point? That could change tomorrow. We talked about companies get bought. Different people start leading organizations. We need to understand what's in there from a technical, what's in there from the foci, what's in there. There's all kinds of changes all the time. So it's not just the time of purchase, it's the constant monitoring that we need technology and automation to make it work, and then that common frame of reference with the
And
metrics.
sometimes
love
it's hard
that.
to look backwards and realize what that change was from point of start, right?
Right. What happened? When did that happen? Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd love to go and take this to a whiteboard so we can start actually building this out in front of you. But we just have a few minutes left, so we're going to do the lightning round.
Okay.
There are a lot of feds in the audience, And so I'm going to ask each of you to come up with very brief, less than a minute, core takeaway about what you would like them to remember about actual implementation. What can they start doing in the next month to better improve their SCRM plan?
Start with me? Oh, well, I want to start off with saying that I've already taken out a trademark on CSCRM, right? Continuous CSCRM. We just got that here. So, just so you guys know. Yeah, and I'll have it printed up for stickers, dollar a sticker.
How you know you're a cool InfoSec project? You got stickers.
So I think the big thing is the two big takeaways I would say is we need a common lexicon. So I want to see interoperability between the various solutions and the ways that we're approaching this. And the other thing is a heavy emphasis on automation. I mean, this is the software footprint for agencies is enormous. Any organization, it's not just an agency, right? Any organization, it tends to be enormous. And we really need to have that automated and something that we can then feed into risk scoring and other metrics for that continuous view.
All right, Sherry?
So again, all of you are here because you're part of this combined fight with cyber and supply chain. And so to that extent, I ask you to just go back and realize who your supply chain risk management office point of contact is. If you don't know, please do, so that if and when you come to the realization of adversarial threats to the supply chain, you know where to go. Thanks.
Fantastic. Jean-Paul?
So he took my answer, so I'm gonna drive in on that. Just one thing to think about that. There are two places you can do automation. You can go find technologies that automate and contextualize just out of the box for what we're trying to do, right? We talked about the fact that there are organizations here sponsored in this environment that have that. There's also your automation that you are designing and you are running that don't start by doing this, but you could leverage. So make sure you do both. Let's make sure we take all the opportunities for automation. You have automation platforms in your environment. Use those, develop those playbooks or whatever that automation needs to do that internally, and then also look at what can you just acquire that will give you the ROI you can justify that already does that, and you don't have to do the heavy lifting to build the automation for you. So look for both opportunities.
There are amazing new tools out there, but also start asking your existing tools. Hey, why don't you do this? It's been my hobby horse to ask why vuln management tools don't integrate SBOM for the last 5 years. And as we wrap up, I'll say one quick plug moving forward. We've talked about software transparency. That has led to an assumption that, hey, we need HBOMs as well. And turns out we don't have an idea what an HBOM is. So if you're interested in that, hbom.tech. For a new nonprofit that is going to be exploring that side of things. But before we get to that, there's a lot of lessons learned about making sure that you're sharing information and ready to receive information from across the federal government, making sure that you have the right processes and people in place, and making sure that you have automation and that you're on the lookout for the tools that you need to do the job. So please join me in thanking the panel. And I think we are exactly at time.
Great panel, and Alan, thank you. Great job of moderation. So we're going to get started in just a moment. We'll give our panelists a moment to get off the stage. And Mark and Zach and Sasha, if you can come up, we'll reset and go.